Scripture reading this morning is taken from 1 Timothy chapter 3, verses 8 through 13. 1 Timothy 3, verses 8 through 13. I'll be reading from the New King James Version. Likewise, deacons must be reverent, not double-tongued, not given to much wine, not greedy for money, holding the mystery of the faith with a pure conscience. But let these be first tested, then let them serve as deacons, being found blameless. Likewise, their wives must be reverent, not slanderers, temperate, faithful in all things. Let deacons be the husbands of one wife, ruling their children and their own houses well. For those who have served well as deacons obtain for themselves a good standing and great boldness in the faith which is in Christ Jesus.
Let me encourage you to keep your Bible open to that passage from 1 Timothy chapter 3 if you've already closed your Bibles. 1 Timothy chapter 3, verses 8 through 13 is the passage we'll be studying this morning. I'm excited to study deacons with you and the idea of deacons and what a deacon is and what a deacon should be. I'm excited that this congregation is thinking about and looking to install some new deacons. And I think it's something we should all give serious thought and prayer to. The deacons have such an important job, and I'm so thankful for the deacons we have. I believe we have some wonderful deacons who do work so hard and do so much for this congregation, and I'm excited to have some new ones who are going to work just as hard, and I'm confident will do the best job that they can. Interesting fact, whether you realize this or not, it was actually a year ago this Sunday that I stood in this pulpit and I gave a lesson titled, The Role of the Minister. Okay, so that was the first of a lot of lessons you heard on that title. I say that because it's actually interesting. The word minister in the Bible comes from a Greek word, diakonos. And so a year later, I'm preaching on that same word, a deacon. It means minister. It means worker, and it has just a basic usage of it means that, and it can be used in a very general way to mean a worker or a minister, someone who works in some area of the church. But several times it's actually used as a more specific group of people. There's a general sense in which all Christians are ministers. All Christians are deacons in a very general sense, and that we're workers, that we work in order to advance the kingdom. We work in the work of the Lord. And so in that sense, all of us, and sometimes that word is used in that general sense. But what I want to talk about is the specific sense. The sense that's used in 1 Timothy chapter 3 where it's a specific group of people being mentioned. A specific group of men that have to meet certain qualifications. But what deacon is just basically that. It's workers, people who will work, people who will use their talents and their skills to help further the work of the church. And so that's what this congregation is looking for, men who are willing to do that, men who are able to do that, who are able to work in a specific area that will help benefit the Lord's church here in Lawton. And so that's what we're looking for. But as you think of these men, and one of the things Jerry mentioned is that he wants you to think of people who come to your mind and wants feedback from this congregation, names given, who could fill that role and who you believe would do a good job of filling the role of deacon. It's always important to remember when you think about any office, if we want to name it that way, of the church, whether it be elder or deacon or minister or whatever it is, that we want to turn to the Bible, that we want to turn to God's word and say, who does God say that these type of men should be? What are the qualifications? Not necessarily that I just think a person would fit, but first and foremost, who does God say? What are the qualifications that God has given to deacons? And that's what I want to look at. And I have you open to 1 Timothy chapter 3 because it's really the only passage in the Bible that goes through and gives the list of qualifications of deacons. It's right after the qualifications of the elders is given. And he's going to list several. And that's basically what we're going to do with our lesson is we're going to go through and look at the different qualifications for a deacon. And actually, he'll describe the deacon's wife, and we'll talk about that. But point number 1 on your outline is this: a deacon must. Okay, and so the first several verses is things that a deacon must do or things that a deacon must not do. Okay, number 1, a deacon must be reverent. Look at 1 Timothy 3 and verse 8. It says, likewise, deacons must be reverent. The word reverent means grave or honorable. Basically, it means he treats serious things seriously. I'll be honest with you, I believe that this is one of the great downfalls of our society. I believe that the lack of reverence has, in a sense, plagued our world. And it has found its way into religion often. That people in many regards are not reverent. We get confused, things that this should be funny to us and things that should not be funny to us. Things we should treat seriously and things that we could be more lighthearted about. Because there are things we could be lighthearted about. And there are things we can be funny about. And there are things we can tease about and goof about and have a lot of fun about. And this is not people who never smile. This is not people who never laugh and joke and tease and cut up and have a good time. Now, that's not true of these people. Now, these individuals should have that good humor about them. I mean, that's fine if they're funny and they're lighthearted in a lot of ways. But when you work with the church, you work with things that are very serious. And there are times when you have to treat things very seriously. When we talk about what is right and what is wrong, when we talk about issues that ultimately will lead to whether a soul goes to heaven or a soul goes to hell, when you talk about reaching out to a community full of people who are lost, and because of their sins, they are stained. And because of their sins, they are separated from God. And something needs to be done. How can we reach them? What can we do? What can the church do? And in what areas can we work? And in what areas can we improve to reach the lost and the dying world? What can we do? Understand, that's serious. When you talk about sin and the gravity of sin, that's serious. When you talk about God and you talk about His Word, that's serious. It's fine to be funny. It's fine to be lighthearted and goof around at times, but there's also a time where we have to be serious. And if we can't decipher between those two times, if I can't decipher in my mind when I should be serious and when I should goof around a little bit, when I could be lighthearted and when I need to be a little more strict or a little more stern, how do you decipher that? You know, honestly, this reverence is one of the reasons where I know a lot of Christians just don't find a lot of enjoyment out of a lot of the television we have now. All right, and you watch a lot of the comedies that come out, and I tell you, it's jokes about sexual immorality, and it's jokes about foul language and pervertedness and harsh, and just all kinds of things. And you know, people love to laugh at it and joke at it, but there comes a point in someone's life where they ought to say, that's just not funny. It's sad. It's tragic. And I don't find that humorous. I tell you, a deacon ought to be a man who understands the difference, who is reverent, who when it comes to God, when it comes to His Word, when it comes to the work of the church, they say, okay, now it's time to be serious. And they can understand the difference between a lighthearted, silly type attitude, which is fine to have it sometimes, but at other times it's time to be serious. And they know the difference, and they are serious about serious things. They're reverent. Point number 2. Likewise, deacons ought to be reverent, not double-tongued. All right, so a deacon must not be double-tongued. And basically, you get the imagery, right? Don't speak as if you have two tongues. All right, a deacon ought to not be a person who talks as if he has two different tongues, double-tongued. In one situation and in one scenario, he says this, and then he gets around another group of people, another situation, another scenario, and he says something completely different. I think we're used to that in a lot of the things of the world. We're used to it from politicians, right? What do they believe? Well, it depends on who they're talking to, kind of. And sometimes we see that in the business world, that people work out in the world, and depends on who they're talking to, the things that they say, and the manner in which they speak. These men can't be that way. They have one tongue, right? It's not double. They don't say one thing to one group of people, another thing to another group of people. They have one tongue. They speak the same thing, whether they're talking to members of the church or members of the world. They talk the same way, whether they're talking to the east side of the congregation or the west side of the congregation, right? They talk the same thing, whether it's to their friends, whether it's to their family, or whether it's to a visitor. It's not a different approach to, or not different. It's not different gospel they're speaking. It's not different work that they have. They speak the same thing. No matter who they're talking to, they're not double-tongued. They're not dishonest. They're not liars. They speak truth, and they speak it whether they are in the presence of someone who will appreciate it or the presence of someone who won't. And they're not double-tongued. Number 3, they're not given to much wine. All right, again, it says not given to much wine there in verse number 8. A couple things I want to address about this, because I think sometimes this passage is used in ways that's not real fair and not real honest. Sometimes people will take this and say, okay, but they can be social drinkers, right? I mean, they're not to be given to much wine. They're not to be drunkards, but they can drink a little bit. Understand, that's not what this is saying. Sometimes we treat it as if that what he's doing is he's giving license here to drink a little bit, just not a lot. I tell you, that's not what he's saying at all. When you condemn the overuse of something, you don't necessarily give permission to do a little bit of it. And I tell you, a verse comes to my mind is James chapter 1 and verse 21. In James chapter 1 and verse 21, he's talking about not being given to an overflow of wickedness. Right? Because he condemns an overflow of wickedness, doesn't mean that a little bit of wickedness is okay. Right? James isn't saying, well, you could be a little wicked. I mean, you could do some wickedness, just don't be given to an overflow of it. Right? Don't be overfilled with wickedness. Just do a little wickedness. And that's not what James is saying. He's just condemning the idea of being overly wicked. In the same sense here, he's not in any way saying it's okay to drink a little wine. What he's saying is you're not to be given to, not to put somebody in as a deacon who drinks much wine, not a drunkard. And you can understand why. I think we all can as you think about it. A deacon, as we talked about, has a very important job, very important work. Those who are given to much wine don't think clearly. It prohibits your ability to reason. It takes away your sobriety. It takes away your ability to make good decisions. Case in point, how many people have you ever heard who have done something wrong that they normally wouldn't do and blamed it on the fact that they were drunk? All the time, right? I mean, people do that a lot. If you talk to people who get drunk, they say, oh, I was drunk when I did that, as if it's an excuse. No, don't do that. And these deacons have such an important job. The work that they do is crucial to the functioning of the church. The work they do is vital to the church. And you can't have somebody who doesn't think clearly because they've taken away their ability to think clearly by substance abuse, by alcohol. Not those types of men. They have to be men who are sober. They have to be men who think clearly, because the work that they do is too important not to think clearly. Number 4, not greedy for money. Again, I think we understand this. Why would that be true? Why would you not want somebody who's greedy for money? Well, the truth is they deal with money, and they work with money. Deacons look over a lot of different areas. Sometimes you have deacons who look over technology, and guess what? That stuff costs money. And you have deacons over just different areas, buildings and grounds, and deacons over all kinds of different things, different works that people have to do. And they have to work with money in order to do those jobs. And there are times they have to purchase things, and they have to use finances in order to do that. Well, you wouldn't want somebody who was greedy for money for their own personal use. somebody who might embezzle some, or somebody who might keep some for themselves, or somebody who might say, well, I need a little money for this, and then when they find out, hey, it didn't cost as much as I thought, I'll just pocket the rest. I mean, that's dishonest, that's wrong, and yet it's the types of things that people who are greedy for money do, and you can't have that. They have to be honest. They have to be able to work with money and that not be a cause of stumbling for them. Next one. They have to hold the mystery of the faith with a pure conscience. You know, when you think about the work of the church, there's a lot of things that the church does that people in the world might be able to do a good job of, right? I mean, you talk about, well, we talked about earlier, you know, we have deacons who work with our PowerPoint, and have deacons who put together our website, and all that different stuff is done by one of our deacons. There are people in the world who could do that, who know how to do PowerPoints and how to put technology together. And you think of the different works of deacons. Some look over, you know, the buildings and grounds, and people look over different areas, you know, and there's deacons for all kinds of things. As you go to different congregations, some congregations have deacons of education and deacons of this, and there are people who might do certain jobs well. But the church is more than just doing those jobs well. A deacon has to be a man of faith. A deacon has to be able to hold to that faith. A deacon has to be a man who not only does he use his talents and his skills for the betterment of the church, but he's also a man who believes what we do. He's a man who believes God and his word. He holds to it. And I tell you, the difference between that type of man and maybe some others in the world is you can trust that one. A man who has that faith, a man who believes in God and holds to that with a pure conscience, a man whose religion is pure and right, you can trust him to do things, and you can just trust him because he's a faithful man of God, and he's going to do the work that he's been asked to do, and he's going to do it the best he can, and he's going to do it as somebody with integrity, and as somebody who might use talents that other people in the world might have, but he can use those talents in ways that nobody else in the world can, because he's a man of faith, and he holds to that faith. And that faith is what grounds him, and that faith is what keeps him working the way he works, and that faith is what makes him do the things he does, and that faith is what motivates him to work in the way that he works. Now, other people in the world might do those things, and then maybe they do it to collect a paycheck. This man does it because he loves God. This man does it because he loves the church, and he's willing to use his talents, his skills, and his abilities. He's willing to work on his abilities and develop abilities for the work of the church because he loves it so much, because he's got a pure conscience about his faith. His faith is pure and it's right, and that's the type of man you need as a deacon. The next one is this, and this is an important one. He must be tested. Read verse 10 with me. He says, "But let these also first be tested. Then let them serve as deacons, being found blameless." Now, this one's important to me because I've seen it done what I believe is the wrong way in times past, where putting someone in as a deacon has almost more been used to encourage that person to do what's right. All right, well, this person hasn't been working real hard, but maybe if we put him in as a deacon, it'll encourage him to come to services more often. If we put him in as a deacon, it'll encourage him to work better. And it's almost been used as a motivation. Well, he's a deacon now, so now he has to start working. Paul says, no, this is somebody who's already been a worker. This is somebody who's already been tested. This is somebody who you've already looked at, and because he's been tested, he's been found blameless. Not sinless, not a man who has no faults, but a man, some of your translations might say above reproach. Or as you look at those different qualifications, and as the names are submitted, the elders are going to look and they're going to see these different names, and they're going to look at him and they're going to say, okay, no, he's not given to much wine. If he's given to much wine, there's fault found in him. He can't be a deacon because he's given to much wine, or the other qualifications, he's double-tongued. We can't have that. But this man is someone who you have seen him in the way he lives. You've seen him, and we'll talk about it here in a moment, the way he is with his family. You've seen him in the way he works. And you say, that man, I have nothing against him. I have nothing that I can say, nah, he's double-tongued. He's given too much wine. I can't say that about him. He's above reproach in that way. That's who we're looking for men. The church is looking for men who have been tested. They've already proven themselves to be faithful to God. They've already proven themselves to have that pure faith. They've already proven themselves to not be double-tongued. They've already proven themselves to not be given to much wine. They've already proven themselves to be reverent. They've already proven themselves as faithful members of the Lord's church, as workers in the Lord's church. It's those types of men who are qualified to hold that important position of deacon. The next one is they must be married. And what we're going to do is we're going to read verse 11, but we're going to come back to this in just a moment. It says, likewise, their wives must be reverent, not slanderers, temperate, faithful in all things. Verse 12 says, let deacons be the husbands of one wife. Okay, so from that you get, well, they have to be husbands, right? And not married to just anybody. We'll talk about the types of women that they need to be married to here in just a moment. But they need to be married. And they need to be married to just one woman, okay? And so hopefully that part is a given. But just married to one woman is who they need to be married to. Now, I think about this as, I'm not a deacon, and I understand that, but I do work with the church, and I know that many throughout, that I've known of throughout the years who have been workers of the church, whether deacons or elders or ministers in different regards, I think you can understand why that is. I tell you, I lean on my wife so much for strength and so much for support. And I know so many deacons who do, and I know so many elders who do, and I know so many ministers who do, who are strengthened by their spouses, who do better work because of the women that their spouses are. They strengthen us. They make us better. They make us do our jobs better. I tell you, my wife, and I'm not a deacon, I understand, but the same is true. Whether you're a deacon or an elder or a minister, it's true. Your wife at times will tell you, hey, you need to do maybe a better job at that. And at times she'll tell you, hey, you did a good job. She strengthens you. And so I see why this command is given. I tell you, I wouldn't be the man I am without my wife. She makes me a better person. She makes me a better worker. At times when things are tough and things have, since I've been here, things have been wonderful. You guys treat me better than I deserve. But I've been at times in my life where I tell you I felt broken, right? And I have felt just beat down, and I have felt as if all that I'm doing is for nothing, and all that I'm doing is for naught, and it's just a challenge to I hate to say it, but it's a challenge to stand up in the pulpit and to preach, and you don't feel like the things you're saying are making a difference. You don't feel like people are listening. And I tell you, in so many ways, it's my wife who has encouraged me and has helped me to not give up and to be stronger. That's what a wife can do for somebody. The work of the church is not always easy. It's wonderful work. It's great work, but it's not always easy work. And to have somebody there by your side is just a wonderful help. And so he says he has to be the husband of one wife. And then the final thing in the first point is they have to rule their children and house well. Again, from verse 12, saying ruling their children and their own house as well. It's important that you see from those who are going to work with the church that they work in their own homes as well. It's people who are going to be given such an important task that you can tell that they're going to take it important because they take other tasks that are given to them as important. One of the most important tasks that a person will be given is raising their children. And if he doesn't take that seriously, why would you expect him to take seriously the task of working in the church? And so you have to be able to see that attitude, that reverence. I take serious things seriously. and I look at the serious parts of my life, and I'm going to do whatever I can to do the best at that I can. And that's what this man will do. We talked about wives just a moment ago and the importance of them, but again, notice that's not true of all wives. I believe my wife is a great encouragement to me because I believe she's a wonderful, godly woman. But there are some women in this world who would not encourage their husbands to be preachers, to be workers for the church. There are other women who wouldn't encourage their husbands to persevere. Maybe it comes to your mind Job's wife, right? When he told her, or when she told her husband, curse God and die. Right? That's not the encouragement you need from a wife. And so what he does next, and point number 2, is he's going to give qualifications for a deacon's wife. Right? He's got to be married. It's got to be to one woman, but not just any woman. This is the type of woman that he needs to be married to. Verse 11 says, likewise, their wives must be reverent. The same thing we talked about earlier. They treat things seriously as well. They know when to be lighthearted and to laugh and to have fun. They also know when to be serious. And so that's the type of woman that he has to be married to. They have to not be slanderers, right? And that's what he'll say. Let deacons be, verse 11, likewise, their wives must be reverent, not slanderers. Basically, the idea of a slanderer is someone who hurls verbal abuse, right? So she's very careful about what she talks about and who she talks about and the way she talks about people. I tell you, things like gossip and backbiting, the things that people speak can hurt the church so badly at times. You shouldn't have that problem with deacons' wives because they're not going to slander. They're not going to gossip. They're not going to speak evil in the ways that some people speak evil. They're going to watch what they say. They're going to watch the way they speak about people. The next one is temperate. Basically, the word means sober. Many times it's translated as sober. Basically, she thinks clearly. And you could talk about sobriety in a lot of different ways. A lot of things take away sobriety. Sometimes things like, too much wine takes away sobriety, and other drugs take away sobriety. Sometimes things like anger can take away sobriety. I don't think clearly because I just get too mad. And sometimes I don't think clearly, and just because of other things caused me to not think clearly. Well, this is a woman who has to think clearly. She has to be temperate. She has to control her temper. She has to control the things that might hurt her ability to think rationally and reasonably about different subjects. The last one for the women says she must be faithful in all things. Right? She's a faithful Christian woman. As you talk about a deacon, they have to be faithful and their wives have to be faithful. They have to be faithful in all things. They have to love God and they have to serve God. They have to live the way they live, not necessarily just because they're husbands or deacons, but because they love God, because they serve Him, because they're faithful to Him. And so that's the type of woman that he needs to be married to. And the last point number 3, we learn, I have in verse 12, it's supposed to be verse 13. We learn what deacons will obtain. Okay, verse 13 says, those who have served well as deacons obtain for themselves a good standing. Okay, so number 1, under what they obtain a good standing. Basically, they'll be thought highly of. And I tell you, you probably agree with me. We know that we have several men here who work as deacons. And I tell you what, I think very highly of them. There's not a one we have that I don't think highly of. I appreciate the work they do so much. I realize that there's so much of what gets done here gets done because these men are willing to work for the church. And they serve God faithfully, and they serve the church faithfully, and they do a wonderful job. And I appreciate them, and I hold them in high regard. And I imagine that I'm not the only one. We do. We appreciate their work. They have obtained good standing because they've worked so hard and they've done so good, and we appreciate the time and the hours and the effort they put into the work that they do, the work that we all benefit from, the work that the church here benefits from. And for that reason, we hold them in high regard and we're thankful to them for it. And finally, he says they obtain great boldness in the faith. This is true, I imagine, of of all people who work faithfully for the church is that it helps them grow their faith. I tell you that the more years I work with the church, whether here or in other places, my faith grows. My faith grows. If I'm doing the job of a worker that I should do, my faith grows. I'm sure our deacons can say the same, that over the years their faith has grown. That as they've worked with the church, they've worked for the church, they've worked with God as they've lived faithfully to Him and have tried so diligently to help that church grow, their faith has grown because of it. And so that's one of the wonderful things about the men who will be considered here as deacons. First of all, the fact that they're being considered as deacons means that we think highly of them, and that's just going to keep happening. If they're deacons, that we're just going to think more and more highly of them because we're going to keep seeing the work and the time and the effort that they put in. And what's also going to happen for their benefit and for ours is that their faith will grow. That's what a person obtains as they work with the church. Their faith grows. I hope that this lesson about deacons has maybe clarified some things, maybe helped us see in a new light or a better light the type of men that are qualified to serve as deacons. I want you to think about it. I want you to pray about it. The job of a deacon is such an important one. Those who serve in that capacity do such an important work, and it should never be treated in a light way or a non-important way. You don't want to recommend somebody just because they're a close friend of yours. You don't want to recommend somebody just because you like them or just because maybe you think it'll encourage them. You need to realize how important it is and the qualifications first and foremost that God has given. With that in mind, let us all collectively think and pray about which men would be able to serve this congregation faithfully. I'm going to go ahead and offer an invitation as we do at all of our services, because the most important work that we do is trying to get people to go to heaven. There might be some in here who are not Christians and they need to become Christians. We want to help you do that. If we can study with you, if you've already studied and you know what you need to do to be a Christian, you know that you need to be baptized for the remission of your sins, we would love to help you in that way. Now, there might be some in here who were baptized some time ago but have not been living faithfully. We want to help you get your life right. If you need to confess sin, if you need our prayers, we would love to hear from you. If we can help you, won't you come and sit on one of the front rows while together we stand and sing the song of invitation?